This is a Fox News alert, a crushing blow for Democrats who had hoped against hope. The Associated Press has called Florida's 6th district race for Republican Randy Fine, and in minutes, the polls will close for Florida's 1st congressional district. In 1 hour, the polls will close in Wisconsin's pivotal Supreme Court race between radical Susan Crawford and conservative Brad Schimmel.
The judge race will decide whether the Wisconsin districts get redrawn. They're going to try to gerrymander Wisconsin to remove 2 Republican seats. And as you know, the House is currently Republican by a razor-thin margin, which means that losing this judge race has a good chance of causing Republicans to lose control of the House. If you lose control of the House, there will be nonstop impeachment hearings.
You bet there will be. Joining me now, Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor.
About abortion in Wisconsin, that's a very big deal, so I don't want to downplay that. But redistricting is really huge. Right now, the Wisconsin congressional delegation is 6 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And Democrats really want to change that. Cases are going to come, redistricting cases are going to come before the Supreme Court, and that's where a Democratic, we know this is nonpartisan, but a Democratic victory would really help them.
Ned.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about the special elections out in Florida and Wisconsin that happened today. And these elections are important because they are supposed to tell us about what may or may not happen in 2026, right? And how the people currently feel about the Trump administration and the Republican Party, right? That is the narrative that has been put out there by the media in regards to why these elections are important. And we already have the results of the elections out in Florida and Wisconsin. And the election results tell us that voters do not think that the world is ending under President Trump, right? That is what the results actually really tell us, okay? And I'm going to break down the results here as we have Florida House District 1. This was Matt Gaetz' seat. Jimmy Patronis won pretty comfortably with 57% of the vote compared to the Democrat getting 42.2% of the vote. So we're talking about a 15-point margin. And then when it comes to Florida House District 6, the special election, Randy Fine ended up winning that election, 56.7% to the Democrat Joshua Wills, 42.7%. So that's about a 14-point margin. Now, the mainstream liberal media and the Democrats are going to try to spin these results, these losses, right? They're L's at the end of the day. They're going to try to spin this into wins for Democrats. And the reason why they're doing this is because the idea is that, hey, this is a sign that the voters are pushing back against Trump and that Democrats are gaining momentum because both of these races saw Republican performances that were subpar compared to how President Trump performed in the 2024 election. So again, Democrats are coping hard over these losses here out in Florida. Take a look.
We're getting some results from that other contested race in Florida 1 as that comes in, because those polls closed an hour later. Your read on what we were just hearing about the sort of mood inside the Josh Wheel party there and their understanding of what kind of the hill they were trying to climb is and what tonight's results might mean.
Chris, I think we can define it already, even waiting for the results in the District 1 race with 2 words, game on. These are very bad numbers for the Trump administration, certainly, because, look, even those of us in Florida, we never really expected either of these seats to be won. But the fact that plus 30 seats, deep ruby red Republican seats, have had a 20-point shift, or in some cases we're seeing in the other race right now, it's virtually tied. What does that project for the rest of the country? Wherever else there's going to be a close election or an election that was decided by 4 or 5 points, you've got to be deeply concerned if you're the Republican Party right now looking at these numbers, especially given that this is still supposed to be the honeymoon, Trump at the apex of his powers. We're seeing anything but that. If I could just make one other quick point.
Yep.
I think Cory Booker doing that tonight as well, not just historic. I'm going to make a prediction on this broadcast, Chris. We saw the record set tonight for the longest Senate floor speech. You're going to see that record broken several times over the next couple of years. There's 46 other Democratic senators. Cory Booker has broken the seal. Now the endurance test challenge is going to go to all the other ones because they have finally found their voice. And the voice is resist. Do not let the fascist regime, which unfortunately is the path that the Trump administration is clearly showing they're taking in these first 2 months, win. And they have to stand up and inspire, because certainly a huge segment of the American voters feel that way. We're seeing that in Florida 6 and in Florida 1 tonight.
Yeah, I guarantee you that is not the actual takeaway from this election, right? In Florida, that's not the takeaway. And I'm going to tell you guys what the real takeaway is here. But I want to talk about the other election, Wisconsin, as we did not pull that one out, right? Brad Schimmel ended up losing to Susan Crawford. Susan Crawford has 55.6% to Brad Schimmel's 44.4%. With about 70% reporting. This race has been called by multiple news outlets. So I'm assuming that the Democrat is going to pull this one out, right? Unless a miracle happens. It looks like the liberals will retain control on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So I want to go ahead and play a clip of the liberal media reacting to this race, because they're trying to spin this one as a referendum against Elon Musk, right? This is evidence that the voters are rejecting Elon and that Elon is poison and he's bringing down the Republican Party. Take a look.
Boundaries. You heard maybe Mandela Barnes in the other panel in New York saying that he thought that this was in a lot of ways, Mandela Barnes, for people who don't know, former lieutenant governor of Wisconsin, right. Democrat, saying that in a lot of ways he thought this was a referendum on the involvement of Elon Musk. And we saw Judge Crawford basically making Elon Musk her opponent, not Judge Schimmel, saying like, I didn't know I was going to be, I'm just a humble caveman. I didn't know I was going to be running against a little nod to a Saturday Night Live skit. That's not a good slam on the judge. I didn't know I was going to be running against the richest man in the world. And as has been pointed out, this is a state where your own citizens own the football team. Right. So do you think that was compelling?
I think it's an interesting tactic. It's a little Saul Alinsky-esque in the sense that you've got George Soros and J.D. Pritzker and Reid Hoffman and all these billionaires who've spent far more than Musk did in this, and now pointing and say, well, wait a minute.
I don't think they spent on this. They didn't.
Well, collectively, if you look at all the money from outside that was given to her, again, 77% of it came from out of state, only 15% came from Schimmel, and collectively, a number of the analysis showed.
I'm just saying, like in terms of the money from
individually,
J.B. Pritzker.
But if you look at the whole outside money that came from out of the state, it's clearly.
But you don't think it was a referendum on Musk at all, though?
Oh, I think it had a part of it. I think there are a lot of different issues. I think, again, in Wisconsin, you see that flip back and forth. We're much more so than even like a state like Virginia, which historically has gone the opposite of the White House. You see a reaction one way and a reaction the other way. It's why in the last 35 years, there's only been one time a governor has won when their own party's in the White House. So many of these things were multiple factors, not just Trump, not just Musk, but I think multiple. Those are the easiest ones to cover, but I think it was much more ingredient than that.
Yeah, so I just love how the media tries so hard to drive certain narratives. Like, oh, clearly this is a referendum on Elon, right? You don't think Elon had anything to do with his Supreme Court race, right? Out in Florida, oh, well, Democrats have found their voice, right? They got blown out in 2 elections, but they found their voice, guys, right? They're making a comeback, right? That is the narrative here, right? The media is trying to make narrative reality. And that's essentially what's happening. What is the actual takeaway? Okay, is this a W for President Trump and the Republicans, or is it an L? Is it neutral? What is it? How should we think about this? In my opinion, personally, I think it is a neutral to a small W. And if I had to pick, I would probably go with a small W. And the reason why I'm going to say it's a small W is because ultimately, at the end of the day, the Republicans retain their House seats in Florida, which means that Democrats aren't out here flipping House seats, okay? Republicans aren't losing in House seats, which means that President Trump's agenda is still on the table. And that's the only thing that matters, in my opinion, okay? Now, if Democrats had flipped these seats, then yes, I think we could come away with some solid takeaways to say, hey, that means that Republicans are possibly in big trouble, right? In regards to how people actually feel about President Trump's agenda, right? If you have a deep red district flip blue, right, then that is a rejection of the Republican/Trump agenda. But that didn't happen, okay? These Republicans are not Trump. They ran during special elections, so this wasn't during election season. And I think a lot of Trump voters, a lot of Republicans are probably burnt out from political activism, especially considering how We have been very politically active for the last 3 or 4 years straight, trying to get President Trump back in the White House. So it could have been one of those situations where Republicans were kind of caught off guard because Republicans started surging to the polls at the last minute. Once everybody realized, like, hold on, we need to wake up, right? We need to wake up and get out and vote because these elections are happening. And then all of a sudden you see Republicans surging to the polls at the last minute to put the Republican candidates over the top. Now, compare that to Democrats who have fired up their base, okay? And also on top of that, they have been pouring tens of millions of dollars into these races, right? Particularly the race for Mike Waltz's district. Yeah, they poured a lot of money in that race and they ended up losing, right? Still losing by a decent margin. Now, again, these Republicans did underperform Trump. But Republicans always underperform when Trump is not on the ballot. That is a problem that we need to fix, right? Admittedly, that is an issue that we definitely have to fix. But it's not abnormal. There's nothing abnormal that happened here in the sense that we haven't seen this before, right? We've seen this before just a couple years ago in 2023 during these special elections in which Republicans were losing, okay? Districts were being flipped. And guess what? Come 2024, Republicans took back the House. So these special elections, they don't really mean anything in regards to how the parties are going to do in the next major election, right? Now, in the moment, they mean something because obviously you have seats at stake here. But with Elise Stefanik going back to the House, the Republicans basically maintained their majority. So even if the Republicans would have lost these 2 seats, they still would have had a majority, okay? It just would have been a very slim majority, right? It would have been a lot harder for them to get things done. But regardless, they still maintained the seats, and Democrats didn't win. So I just would not extrapolate anything serious, any serious conclusions from these races, to be honest with you, right? So that's why I'm calling it a small W. When it comes to Wisconsin, clearly that's not the outcome that we wanted. But again, people got to put it in perspective. Just like I told you guys, special election. Republicans showed up at the last minute. Democrats were already planning this. They had their base fired up. They're out here currently doing political activism. They're straight up like campaigning. Like Democrats are in campaign mode right now. Okay. That's why I want people to understand. Republicans are not in campaign mode. Okay. We're not in campaign mode. Democrats are in campaign mode. They're out here holding rallies, doing all types of stuff. So their base is probably very politically active. And that's probably what happened out in Wisconsin. And also on top of that, people got to understand that the Wisconsin court was already a 4-3 liberal majority. So if Brad Schimel would have won, he would have flipped the court. So you already had a liberal court, okay? Now, obviously, the court remaining liberal is not good because it gives the Democrats a better chance of redrawing the maps, gerrymandering in Wisconsin to take away seats from Republicans. But there's no guarantee that's going to happen, right? Like, it's not guaranteed that that is going to happen before the midterms next year, okay? That's just something that they're going to try to do. But again, it's not guaranteed, right? So, I'm not saying it's not bad that we lost out in Wisconsin, that Supreme Court seat, but anybody trying to spin this as, oh, this is a sign that Democrats have life, or this is a sign that Republicans are tanking and that voters are rejecting Trump, or that Democrats are going to blow out Republicans in the midterms. Like, I just don't think it is wise to draw any conclusions from these races, right? I really don't. I just think that personally, these races are just one-offs. And right now, President Trump is still dealing with the negative effects of Biden's economy. And like I told you guys before, and I'll continue to say it, I will stand by this. What is going to determine whether or not Democrats will have a chance is what the economy is going to be like going into the midterms and going into 2028. If the economy is booming going into the midterms, Democrats are not winning, right? Let's say even if the economy is just good, right? If the economy is good going into the midterms, Democrats aren't winning. If the economy is booming or good going into 2028, Democrats are not winning, okay? And right now, it seems as if we're going through the worst of what President Trump is trying to do to fix Biden's economy, right? So if this is the worst, okay, if this is the worst, if the worst of President Trump fixing Biden's economy happens this year and everything just gets better moving forward, yeah, that means it's over for Democrats. Democrats aren't winning in that scenario. So that's why I'm like, anybody coming out here claiming that, oh, Democrats have the momentum and everything is falling apart for Trump and Elon Musk and all, and it's like, no, it's not wise to come to those conclusions, because these really are just one-off elections in which I believe that the GOP voters got caught off guard, right? And once they realized what was happening, a lot of people went out and voted. Had the GOP been more organized, had people known what was at stake, okay, before, a lot sooner, okay, I think that the outcome would have been different. I think the only reason why the conservative lost in Wisconsin is literally because I don't think people are really paying that much attention anymore, considering how I think people are kind of experiencing some fatigue when it comes to political activism. And again, Democrats, they're rallying up their base right now. So again, they're a lot more active, okay, politically than the Republicans are, at least the grassroots. And that is what you're seeing out in Wisconsin. So, again, not the ideal scenario, but it's not the end of the world. I guarantee you, Democrats would have preferred to have flipped them seats out there in Florida than to win that Wisconsin Supreme Court race, right? I guarantee you, if Democrats would have flipped the 2 seats out in Florida and they would have lost in Wisconsin, that Supreme Court seat, they would be much happier. They would be much happier, right? But, this scenario right here, again, is not a big W for President Trump and the Republicans, but it's a small W. It's definitely not what the mainstream liberal media is going to make out to be. I would not draw any real conclusions from this outside of the fact that, hey, Trump voters, Republicans, when Trump is not on the ballot, they need to vote, right? Like, we need to get out and vote with, like, Trump is not on the ballot, right? That's the only conclusion that I would draw from this. I think that what's going to happen in 2026 is going to be determined by the state of the economy at that point in time. And again, if this is the worst that we're experiencing right now of Trump's 4 years, then yeah, it's not going to be good for Democrats moving forward into the future. If anything, I think that they should have performed better today. Consider how they pour all this money into these races out in Florida. In Mike Waltz's district, I mean, they poured millions and millions and millions of dollars. They outspent the GOP guy 10-1. Okay, again, still lost by double digits. Still lost by double digits. So, I mean, I'm just saying, like, when you actually take a step back at it and you look at it, you say, okay, like, the media's, they're going to blow this into something that is not, looking at it with sober eyes, right? It's like, okay, it's neutral to a small W. So, again, if Republicans show up, right, when Republicans show up to vote, then, Democrats aren't winning, right? They aren't winning. And I think that is really what the takeaway is, to be honest with you. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.